So welcome everybody on my behalf also. As said, I'm KooPee Hiltunen and I'm the director of Neogames Finland, which is the hub of the Finnish games industry. Neogames has been around 13 years. We were established in 2003, so we have seen the rise of the Finnish games industry, and we have been witnessing many of the things which have happened in the Finnish games industry during last years and last decades. Our mission is to accelerate and coordinate the growth of the Finnish games industry. We are an independent association. We are not owned by anybody else than our members, and our members are game developers, game researchers, and companies offering services for the game industry, and of course the game educational facilities. So we are basically an independent actor whose main mission is to help the Finnish games industry to grow. You already heard some facts and figures about the Finnish game industry, but I'll go a little bit deeper to those facts. So, if you think about last year, in 2015, which is last year when we have some statistics, the Finnish game industry grew in all the indicators. The amount of the games published, I think that there were around over 150 commercial games, mostly to the mobile platforms. The amount of employees grew, and the total turnover of the industry increased. And in addition to this, for instance, in recreational side, people making games as a hobby, the year was also very active for the Finnish games industry. So basically, last year was a good year for us. And from national economy point of view, the game industry is at the moment the most relevant content export industry in Finland. So people always ask me if the game industry is going to be a new Nokia from the national economy perspective. I don't think so, but I can honestly say that when we look at the game industry, it is by far the most relevant content export industry for Finland. And it's one of the few industries which is growing at the moment. And we have been growing faster than the global market. The compound annual growth rate was from 2004 to 2015 around 45%. So it basically means that if you had invested 40 million euros to the Finnish games industry year 2004, the value of the investment would now be 2.4 billion, which is quite a lot of money. As mentioned, the roots of the Finnish game industry were in the 80s. Actually, the first Finnish digital game was already developed in 1979. And the first domestic market games, first commercial ones, were developed in the mid-80s. In the beginning of the 90s, the Finnish gaming scene, people making games as a hobby, started to taking shape, and the first still existing game studios were established in '95. So somebody might think that the Finnish game industry is a new phenomenon, but it's not. We have roots which date back to the beginning of the 1980s, and we have companies which are over 20 years old. And if you think about the volatility of the games industry in general, I think that if a company is able to maintain its business for over 20 years, it's something to be respected. As mentioned, also the Finnish games industry has long roots in the mobile games. The reason for that is that some of the first mobile games were developed in Finland. Taneli Armanto Snake, I think that everybody knows, it's a classic game. Of course, it was made different platforms before it was made to mobile, but it was one of the first mobile games. And basically, this kind of background gives the Finnish game studios longer history in the mobile game development than almost anybody else. And if you have been doing game development first for a certain platform for a long period of time, it basically means that you know something about the platform. Am I talking too fast? Can you translate? It's okay. Okay. Yeah. The 2000 was decade of many different things happened. First, Finnish big hits. Habbo Hotel was one of them. Max Payne was one of them. Supreme Snowboarding in the end of the 90s was one of them. Then there was a little bit of recession in the beginning of 2000. If you are old enough, you might remember the dot-com hype, which went down, crashing down. It wasn't very successful in the end. But then in the 2005 on, something new started to happen. And that the new thing was the digital distribution. First in Steam, then it went to the in PC through Steam, then it went to the more console platforms. And in 2008, actually, Apple launched App Store. And one could say that the App Store was a perfect storm for the Finnish games industry. Finnish game developers were prepared for the digital distribution. And I think that is one of the lessons to be learned. There is always disruptions in business. Some of those disruptions you can see beforehand. And if you can see those disruptions beforehand, you have time to prepare yourself for those disruptions and utilize them. Because I would say, I would dare to say that Finnish game industry, as we know it today, wouldn't exist without digital distribution. It was a perfect storm for Finnish game studios. Another big thing for the Finnish game studios was, of course, free-to-play in mobile games. So free-to-play has been around for a while. I think that the first online free-to-play games were developed already in the end of the 90s. But when it arrived to the mobile platforms, and when a company called Supercell actually found a way how to utilize and how to develop games which utilize the free-to-play model, where the game design follows the monetization model. It was another perfect storm for the Finnish games industry. And those things, basically, digital distribution and free-to-play, were disruptions the Finnish game industry and some of the companies were able to utilize. Well, at the moment we are in a new situation. I can talk a little bit more about that later on, but at the moment the mobile games industry is quite mature. As if you are game developers, you know that making a free-to-play game and making it profitable is harder than it used to be a couple of years ago. And that means basically that there is new tricks to be found if you want to be successful in the industry. But that is the history. Why do I explain the history of the Finnish games industry? I see Finnish games industry as a result of different things happened throughout the history. So it wasn't invented overnight. It wasn't something which was born by itself, but it was created by the different kind of things along the way. Well, if you take a look at the studios, as said, Finnish game studios are quite young companies, young companies and startups. And altogether, over 200 game studios have been established during the last 4 years. So basically, we have quite a few companies which are older than let's say, 10 years. If you think about the companies, one of the phenomena we have seen is that many of those companies are so-called second-round startups. With a second-round startup company, I mean companies like Kiri's company, Shark Punch series over there. He has been around in the game industry for years, a couple of studios before, and now he's running a new studio. So this kind of studio started to emerge in 2011, 2012. And I see it as a sign of the maturity of the industry. So we have such a mature industry that people who have been doing games before, developing games in different studios, they are able and willing to invest their capital from the previous studios, for instance, to new ones. And if you have been in the games industry, let's say like 10 years, it's obvious that you know more than if you were a newbie. So it's kind of no-brainer that these studios, they have better chances to succeed than the studios which don't have any track record in the games industry. And Jiri is going to tell you something about the investment side. It's also easier for those studios to get investment because they have a track record, they have reliability from investors' eyes. If you think about the studios and the years establishment, there is some facts and figures. As you can see, the heyday, so to speak, for the Finnish games industry when it comes to the establishment of studios was 2012. And before that, the number of studios grew quite steadily, but there was this kind of peak in 2012. And for instance, in 2015, last year, 29 new studios were established. It doesn't sound maybe like much, but if you think about that, Finland is around when it comes to the number of people, it's around the size of St. Petersburg. So 300 studios from a small country is not a bad number. And if you take a look at Finland, one of the things is that not all the studios are located in Helsinki area. So there is something going on in the other parts of Finland also. It's concentrated in the capital area. 38% of the studios are in the capital area. But the concentration has been decreasing. The role of the capital area has been decreasing. So basically it means that if we take a look at the map, this is Finland, so there is quite a lot of studios, 29% of the studios are located in central Finland. There is around 10% of the studios located in eastern Finland, 8% in western Finland, and around 18%, which is quite a big number, is located in northern Finland. So it's quite widespread in that sense. It also means that there has to be a reason for this. One of them is, of course, startup boom, which was going on a couple of years ago. But another reason is that there is different kind of regional activities going on in different parts of Finland. So regional activities are located, for instance, here in the eastern Finland, in Kotka, Lappeenranta area. And some of the studios, as far as I know, 4 of those studios are originally Russian studios. So there is some studios from Russia which have moved to Finland, or some people from Russia who have opened a studio in Finland. In those areas where there is regional activities, mainly to the eastern Finland, because it's obviously nearest to Russia. Well, as said before, also, we are a mobile-driven industry. Last time when we made a study, around 85% of the studios were developing games for the mobile platforms. Some of them were also developing games for PCs or consoles. For instance, if you know the Finnish studio, one of the oldest or second oldest studio in Finland, Remedy, creator of Alan Wake, Max Payne, and Quantum Break, they also used to have their mobile development going on. But as I said before, there is a new disruption in the mobile games. And it is that at the moment, if you think about, for instance, App Store, over 500 new games are launched in App Store every day. It basically means that there is one game in every third minute. It means also that the competition is quite fierce and the user acquisition costs have increased. And for that reason, the trend in the Finnish games industry seems to be at the moment that more and more studios are going to different other platforms. For instance, PC Steam is one of the studios one of the platforms we have seen quite a lot of development during the last couple of years. Some studios are doing digital downloadable content for the consoles, and of course there is new opportunities like VR and, for instance, smartwatches. There is actually at least one studio in Finland developing games to the smartwatches. So basically games you can play with your Apple Watch. So there is a new disruption coming. So what are going to be the consequences of that disruption? We don't know yet, but we see that there is new things emerging, and of course there is some of the companies are responding to that challenge, or every company is responding to that challenge in their own way. Yeah, and if you think about console or PC games, around 30 of those were published in Finland in 2015. So I think the biggest one, or I don't think I know the biggest one, was Quantum Break, which was a Remedy game. They developed it for at least 5-6 years. So it was once again a big endeavor from Remedy. So that is the kind of share of the platforms. iOS is the most popular platform among the developers. Android, I don't know what's the reason for Windows Mobile, because basically it's a dead platform at the moment. PC, and as you can see, there is some VR platforms and that kind of stuff. How much do I have time? Okay, yeah. And as I said, there is around 2,700 people working in the games industry in Finland at the moment. And it is quite a big number compared to the humble beginnings of the Finnish games industry. If you think that 2004, when we made our first study, the number was 400. Now the number is 2,700. And many of the Finnish game studios are still recruiting. There is some of the studios who have all the time open positions. They are looking for different kind of programmers, because the area of programming has been growing. But there is all the time there is open jobs in the Finnish game studios. And as I said in the beginning, also this kind of hobbyist, activist part in Finland has been very active during last years. For instance, the Finnish Game Jam, Anna-Kaisa Aako is here. She's from the Finnish Game Jam. Could you raise her hand? So if the figures you gave me are correct, you had last year 289 game enthusiasts in 15 different towns during the global game jam, making games as a hobby. 2015, yeah. More this year, so it seems to be active, even more active this year. And one of the phenomena we have seen is the esports. I don't know how big it is in Russia, but in Finland we actually have seen some of the esport tournaments in a primetime TV, in a national broadcasting channel, which is kind of wacky thing. I couldn't see that coming. If somebody would have told me 5 years ago that there is going to be a Counter-Strike tournament in primetime TV in Finland in 2015, I wouldn't have believed. Yeah. This is some of the figures, and if you think about the economy part of the game industry, well, first of all, there has been quite a lot of investment for the Finnish game studios during last 3-4 years, and there has also been quite a big investment from the government side. through Tekes, which is the Finnish funding agency of technology and innovation. And if you take about the turnover, so take a look at the turnover. So this is basically the figure of how the turnover has been growing. So as I said, in 2004 when we started Neogames, or 2003, the turnover was 40 million. In 2008 it was 87 million. In 2012 it was 250 million, and in last year it was 2.4 billion. Most of the growth, of course, came from two big studios, Supercell and Rovio. But there is also quite a lot of studios at the moment, especially this year, who are going to make a turnover which is basically something between 20 to 50 million. So the growth seems to be continuing, and it seems to be expanding. So it's not only a game for two big studios anymore. Yeah, so I think that this was it at this point.